Okay, welcome to the week two go-to session. This is the second class lecture out of four we're going to be holding this month. And actually, that reminds me, I want to begin by delivering an important announcement. There's a change to the schedule for next week. Maybe some of you have noticed it already, but if not, I'm just going to mention it here now. Things have been bumped up a little bit, specifically in terms of next week's go-to lecture. Okay, the class lecture for next week. Um, it will be pre-recorded in advance, so you don't have to worry about showing up live like you're doing right now. It is going to be pre-recorded and put up on the FSO platform on Sunday, I believe. Miss Fox is handling that side of things, so she can confirm that. But I believe it's Sunday that it will be up and available for all of you to access. And then you will have until Tuesday night, I believe, to take the associated quiz, the weekly check-in. They're not specifically go-to quizzes. They cover information that can go beyond that. So, for example, for week one, you had to answer some of the questions using the syllabus. But in part, the weekly check-ins are, well, they're tested to make sure that you're keeping up with all of the week's activities. But a lot of that information does come through the class lectures. So it's difficult to do well on the weekly check-ins if you haven't attended or viewed after the fact the weekly class lecture. So for week three, it's going to be uploaded in advance starting on Sunday, and then you have until Tuesday night, not Thursday, like as usual, to take the quiz. Now, why have things been bumped up? Because it's Hall of Fame week, and most of you probably know what Hall of Fame is. If not, you can probably glean the gist of it just from that title, Hall of Fame week. Every year, Full Sail honors about a handful or so of people who attended Full Sail in the past and have gone on to do great, terrific things. Sometimes they've won Oscars. Sometimes they've done, I don't know, sound work or other technical work for films or music. Um, or other endeavors, right? Basically anything that's available here for study at Full Sail. And we honor sort of, 5 to 7 bigwigs. People have gone on to do really important and impressive things. And there are several days of events and presentations and speaking presentations that are delivered, and it's a great time for everybody just to get involved. There's definitely a buzz and an energy that is on campus, but as online students, you get to access a lot of the same stuff because many of these events are streamed for you. So basically, we want to allow students to have as much free time as possible to participate and join in on Hall of Fame activities. For those of you who are online, I believe if you go to Full Sail Connect, I'm thinking, you can see information about Hall of Fame. You can see a schedule of events, etc. You can access the stuff that will be streamed. Josh was saying, course at a glance says the week 2 assignment, the week 3 assignment is due Sunday. I'm not sure what that means because there are a lot of assignments due. If you're meaning the principal assignments, yeah, we'll talk about that during this session. If you're referring to the quiz itself, the weekly check-in for week 3, that will be due on Tuesday, not Thursday. You should be used to the pattern, right? We have a go-to class lecture early in the week. And then you have to take the weekly check-in quiz by Thursday at midnight. It's just that for next week, things have been bumped up, okay? There will be no live session, but there will be a recorded session, which will be made available starting on Sunday. And then you'll have until Tuesday to take the quiz. Joshua, no, the essay itself, all other activities go to just follow the normal due date pattern. So we'll get into the essay during this session, which will be due on Sunday. Okay, so what's today? Today's Monday. So Sunday, the essay is due. Okay, so we're just talking about stuff that's coming a week ahead of us. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, just a reminder, online people, yeah, check in the streaming events from the Hall of Fame. Uh, you know, I think it's cool that you have access to this stuff. The on-campus people, goes without saying. There really is a buzz and energy that associates Hall of Fame week, so be sure to attend things, the various events. Also, we have students here in Orlando who quite literally are sometimes volunteering, helping out during Hall of Fame week, so it gives them a break too, so they don't have to worry as much. So yeah, we've bumped up the order of just the weekly check-in. Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? So I can move forward with the The more on topic stuff for today? Okay, good. Everybody's on that. Okay, so welcome to week 2. How's everybody feeling? How did research go, by the way? I've only had a chance to glimpse at people's work, but did people find good stuff on their chosen role models? Useful information? Does everybody feel like they're learning? I see a frowny face from someone. Uh, everybody, someone mentioned APA and feeling overwhelmed. We'll get into APA today. Okay, so we'll cover a lot of that. But yeah, hopefully everybody at least is getting several steps in the right direction in terms of your research and finding concrete examples of work-related problems or obstacles that your role model has faced and solved. And if you're still struggling, because I see some people saying, most people are responding positively. Some people are responding with or meh, or Crystal said it's a pain. Hopefully it's a good pain. There is good pain, by the way. But if you're legitimately struggling, first of all, you'll get feedback from the instructors this week on your research results. And you can always reach out to your instructors, Ms. Foxrye or Ms. Chapman, who isn't here yet, with any questions you might have, okay? So don't sit there and hide and worry. I'm in communication with some students quite literally every day, okay? And that's fine. That's my job. I enjoy it. I like to see students who have questions, students who just message me out of the blue. Can you take a look at this source? I'm wondering if it's going to work or not. Or we'll get into APA today. But, before I submit my quiz, because there'll be a couple of quiz questions that ask you to show that you understand how to both cite and create a reference in APA format. But I'll have students who get in touch with me before the quiz and say, before I submit these answers, can you look this over? Sure, of course I can. Yeah, so if you have any questions about your research, make sure that you get in contact with your instructors. And now a train is passing by, so outside my window, and I can't hear anything. Okay, it's gone. Okay, so today we're going to get into issues of the essay, and we're going to spend some time talking about APA format because people seem to be frightened of it. And I'll just say right in advance, there's no reason to be afraid at all because APA is easy. I swear it really is. But let's talk a little bit about process and perseverance, which we already started talking about last week. So here's our little image of the writing process. Remember, we covered this. And if you haven't caught on already, each week of this class is basically devoted to a different step in the writing process. So last week, we were basically working on brainstorming and gathering ideas. Right, the research and investigation part started happening last week. And we're getting more into the kind of organizing and writing function this week. Basically, week 1 is devoted to brainstorming and research. Week 2 is devoted to the actual writing. Week 3 is devoted to getting feedback. And then, of course, week 4 is devoted to revising. So we are going through the process one step at a time as you work on your essay. Okay. And it's interesting to note, before I talk about audience, that, you're persevering yourself in this class, right? So already you're learning about perseverance, whether you're aware of it or not. Having to sit down and read through multiple articles. Okay, I've been telling students that you might have to skim 5, 7, 10 articles to find the best 3. Okay, we're not just trying to find any 3 articles. We're trying to find the best 3 that help us understand and learn about specific work-related problems that our role models have had to face and solve. Okay, but that's a challenge. It takes time. A lot of you probably realize that. Okay, so there's perseverance in practice. These classes are accelerated. You all know that. If you're a campus student, English is probably a month 2 class for you. If you're online, it's probably a month 4 class. Okay, so you've already taken classes. You know the speed at which we work. Okay, that requires perseverance. And I'm not joking. Just to get through these 4 weeks. Okay, it means staying on top of things. Even though many of you have jobs, family, okay, other things that you have to keep, lots of other balls you have to keep juggling in the air. Okay, that takes perseverance. So for those of you, if one day you strike it big and become famous, maybe someone will do a perseverance essay on you. Back in 2015 or 2016, Joshua Packard persevered during his 4-week English course. Okay, audience. Who is your audience? Audience, this is probably not the first time you've heard this word. All of you have taken creative presentation, which is a class that stresses the importance of audience big time. I know this firsthand because I teach creative presentation in addition to English. And yes, that's something we hammer home week after week after week, right? You can't create a presentation for prospective employers down the road once you graduated from Full Sail without putting yourself in your audience's shoes. If you think too much from your own position and only your position, um, there's a greater chance of that it will come across as seeming kind of I don't know, too insular, meaning that it's coming too much from you. There's also an increased potential of confusion because lots of times the things that we think are absolutely clear in our heads aren't, um, or they don't become clear to another unless we really step outside of ourselves and make sure that our words and ideas are making sense to another. So yeah, audiences, this isn't just some theoretical concept. It's not something that's mentioned in your textbook or mentioned by the instructor. It's important, not just for the classroom, not just for the essay assignment, not just for school, but just for communication in general. This ability to think about who your listener is, who your reader is, and then really think about their needs. And actually, let me switch gears real quickly. Well, let me see what's coming on the next slide first. Okay, yeah, let me switch gears real quick. I'm going to bring up the assignment sheet for the essay. This also relates to one of your quiz questions for the quiz that's due this week. Sorry. Oh. Okay, I think it's this guy here. Okay, so here's the actual instruction sheet for the essay assignment. Make sure that you're reading through these. I know that goes without saying, but sometimes I have this sneaking suspicion that sometimes students aren't reading the assignment sheets. So that's like number one thing that you should read, right? Before you attempt an assignment, you should probably read the instructions. So make sure that you're going over this with some care because we're not going to read it out loud during the class lecture. But if we go to page 2, you'll see that right in here, kind of in the second box here, it says begin by choosing an audience, in other words, your readers, for your essay. Please choose one audience from the following option. Then you have 3, potential future employers, industry connections, so people like you, right? People are kind of working in the same field that you hope to enter, or your family. I often extend that to mean your family, friends, right? People who are very close to you personally. Let me take a quick sip for my drink. Excuse me. So one of your questions, I'll tell you in advance for the weekly check-in, is to choose one of these 3 options and then explain in some detail how that's going to affect your choices as a writer. Okay? So if I go back to my presentation, Ms. Fox was responding to something. Oh, okay. Joshua asked, what about future students? Yeah, no. You choose one of these 3 options. Okay. And actually, let me go back. I'm sorry to keep going back and forth. Let me just say that when you choose one of these audiences, it's not like you're writing a letter to these people. Like if you choose your family, it's not that your essay will be like, "Dear Mom," or "Dear Uncle Frank." No, it doesn't mean that it's going to take that form. I sometimes describe it to students as, when I write, I actually do think sometimes about other people that might potentially read what I'm writing. Sometimes it's pretty clear, or I'm conscious of that, and sometimes it's subconscious. But I do sometimes think about my readers or who my different readers could be. Sometimes I'll be writing something, maybe it's creative, all right, because my background is in fiction writing, and I might think, wow, if my creative writing instructor from 10 years ago could read this, she would be not just impressed, but she would get a stronger glimpse into who I am or what kind of progress I've made. And so I don't know. I like to think that that's kind of universal. Or sometimes I'll be writing something and I'll think, uh, wow, if my mom were to read this, she'd get a better idea of who I am, or she'd be impressed. Because my mom knows very little about what I do. For a living or why I'm passionate about what I do. So sometimes, I might be writing something and think, well, if she were to read this, she might have a much better idea what her son is doing, what drives him, why he's passionate about what he does. So sometimes I like to think of it as, yeah, you're choosing one of these potential audiences and you are writing to them in a way, but not like directly in the form of a letter, but just in terms of, if they were sort of peeking over your shoulder, or if one day they came across what you wrote, would they be able to follow what you've written and be moved by it and understand better what you're doing. Lots of our students have strong support for what they're studying, but every so often there's that one person, let's just call him Uncle Frank, who doesn't quite understand why you're studying music production or show production or video game design. But maybe after they read your essay, your thoughtful essay, where you've chosen an industry role model to look at. Let's say you've chosen, I don't know, Eminem, right? And after reading your paper, they come away with a much different sense of who you are. They understand now why you're studying recording arts or music production. They understand your passion. They understand with the degree of effort that you've put into this essay and your admiration for Eminem, not just as an artist, but for the way that he's tackled problems and solved them and continued to do so on his path towards success. That's spoken to you on a personal and powerful level because you're trying to do the same thing. So yeah, think about one of these three audience types as potentially reading your paper and getting a glimpse into who you are and what drives you. Okay, does that make sense? It's kind of a hard concept to explain, but um, it's kind of deceptively simple, right? You're choosing one of these audiences. You are, in a sense, directing your work toward them. But yeah, not like in the form of a personal letter or something. Okay, Miss Fox, what did she respond to? So in other words, Josie writes, so in other words, we are informing one of those audiences why we decided to go into the career we chose. No, 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 no. Josie, I was being like really big picture there. Like I was getting philosophical almost. So I apologize for that. I don't want to confuse people. No, you're literally doing what's on the left here. Okay, you're writing a paper in which you either identify three concrete work-related problems that your role model has faced and solved, and then three different separate solutions, or one big giant problem that your role model encountered, and then three different methods that he or she used to get that problem solved. And then you'll also discuss what you specifically learned from your role model's problem solving skills and how you can apply them, okay? Both to your degree problem and then eventually, yes, one day when you enter the industry. So yeah, don't get confused. I just went off on a kind of big picture esoteric tangent there. But yeah, I don't want to confuse people. Joshua says, so we are expanding on what we already wrote for week one. Kind of. I mean, the research is literally just a summary and a reaction to what you found, but it is an expansion in the sense that hopefully those research results are on topic and helpful, and they will be informing you as you address these bullet points here on the left, which will become your paper. And we're going to get into just 1 second, literally, what your paper will include. So that will probably clear things up. So let me return to my presentation. Okay, so once you've identified your specific audience, there are lots of questions you could consider. And a lot of stuff we've covered in Creative Presentation. So things like what your audience already knows, why should they care, what biases they might already have about your topic, what they will learn by reading your essay, and what you hope they will do, think, or feel after reading your essay. You probably won't have these questions like written out with answers to them, but these are the sorts of general questions I was already in a way kind of alluding to with my my little speech there, right? Thinking in general about who could be peering over your shoulder, imagining so at least, reading your essay and what they might think, how they might respond to things, okay? So you're not writing everything just from your position, but you're giving some thought to how others might react to the words you're putting on the page. Okay, so let's start talking about the essay itself, because that's probably what you're most interested in, because that's a pretty big activity, and it's due this coming Sunday. Actually, let me begin with that. What if I say, what is an essay? What does that mean to you? Like you see that word. Who can describe in just a few lines or a few words or a sentence or two? You hear that word essay. What does it automatically mean or bring to mind? If some of you have already read through the instruction sheets, you might have seen some possible answers there. Eric says a short description of something bigger. Okay. Michael says 6 pages of words. Okay. Both of those get to some important things. Eric's right. An essay, we typically think of something short, right? It's a short take on something that could be much longer. There are book-length treatments of things like the Russian Revolution or what's a more recent event? Hurricane Katrina, right? But it's also possible to write a much shorter piece on the subject. So yeah, essays tend to be shorter. Uh, Abigail says short nonfiction work. Okay, good. I like that. I think that's key, right? A short piece of nonfiction writing, and that's actually the definition we're going to use for today. A short, sustained piece of nonfiction writing. William says a collection of paragraphs that detail a certain subject. Okay, that's pretty good. I'll just say that in the broadest sense of the term, essay can refer to lots of different things. Actually, we could even, if we wanted to, go beyond writing and consider lots of different forms, whether it's a presentation or a short video, um, as a sort of essay. But for the purposes of this class, I'm going to go with, Abigail's description, because I think hers is most useful for what we're doing in this class, a short piece of nonfiction writing. Okay? And that's what we're working on for this week. You're going to write a draft of your essay. When I say the word draft, I do not mean it to mean rough draft. Okay, your draft will actually be the finest piece of writing you can hand in. You get a chance to revise in this class. That'll actually be the final activity for the month. But for the purposes of what's due on Sunday, you should be thinking of it almost in terms of like, well, what if there were no revision? Obviously, there is, because we're teaching the writing process. An important step in that process is always to look at your work and revise it. But imagine you only had one chance. You would hand in the best possible work you could, right? That's what you're doing for Sunday. So as Eric says, yes, it's the first draft. It's not a rough draft. It's a first draft. That means that we're not handing in something that, oh, Mr. Sussman or Miss Fox, I know it's only half completed, and I know I still have to add a conclusion, or I know I didn't have time to proofread it, or no. It should be a complete essay. It should be the finest work you could possibly create. It is receiving a grade after all. That's worth 10% of your overall course grade. So it should represent your finest work so far. Eric says, polished to the best of our current ability. Yes, exactly. And I like that emphasis on our current ability, because you'll get feedback both from your instructors and from your classmates, and you'll use that feedback to revise and ultimately hand in at the end of the month. Okay? Because that will reflect then your current ability for the end of the month. Okay, so yeah, best of your current ability right now, because you're going to revise it and improve and increase that ability. Okay, and there we go. So Abigail wins. Well, Abigail, you win nothing. That's what you've won is our respect and admiration. Because, yeah, your answer comes closest to what we have prepared for this presentation. A short piece of nonfiction writing on a particular subject. Okay, so that's what we're working on. Abigail says she was hoping for chocolate. Yeah, I'm a big fan of chocolate. I love chocolate. Okay, back on track. Don't get me off track with food. Let's talk about essay structure, because now you know an essay is due, but how do we put this thing together? I'm going to give some options here, okay? And I'm going to also revisit some important concepts that you've probably learned before in the past, but it never hurts to quickly review them. It will have an introduction. It will have support. Okay, so we're talking like body paragraphs, and we'll have a conclusion. Now, right now, you're all saying, well, duh, I already knew that. Okay, introduction, a middle, a support section, and conclusion. But yeah, it's still important to kind of identify these important pieces, because every so often, there is that student who maybe is new to essay writing, or maybe they come from, I don't know, another country where essay writing takes a much different form. But yeah, these are sort of the three classic sort of foundations, right? An introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, I can't remember what's on the next slide. I don't know if I want to stay here or... Okay, good. Okay, so an introduction. We remember that an introduction should do a couple things. It should ideally grab the reader's attention somehow. And an introduction paragraph ends with a thesis statement. Real quickly, because I believe your McGraw-Hill readings cover some of this. I think your first interactive module has some questions to deal with thesis statements, right? So I'm not going to revisit this stuff entirely, Plus, you probably got it in high school or maybe another college level English class if you've taken one. But to grab your reader's attention via a hook, we're talking about things like beginning with a personal anecdote or beginning with an example. Maybe it's an example from history. Maybe it's an example from something that's currently in the news. Beginning with a thoughtful question. Beginning with a powerful quotation. Beginning with an interesting or surprising fact. Let's see, did I skip anything? But you've heard these techniques in the past, right? Rochelle Fox says, don't start with a question. I'm going to add to that and say that I don't think that's necessarily true, that you can't begin with a question. How you use the question is, is the real issue here. Because all the techniques I just mentioned, they're terrific techniques if you can use them as a way to truly open up your essay. If you can truly find a way to lead into your larger material, they all become lousy techniques if they're used generically or mechanically. So yes, beginning with a quotation is terrific if you can really find one that's relevant and is powerful and is interesting and naturally leads you into your larger topic, but it becomes a lousy technique if you're just throwing in a quotation for no reason. Same thing with a question. If you're asking a generic question that you're not interested in asking and your readers aren't interested in considering, yeah, there's no reason for it. And that's the same for all those techniques. Starting with an interesting fact, okay, cool. But if it has no larger function, that's not interesting at all. So yeah, they're all awesome techniques if you can use them well. They're terrible techniques if you use them generically or mechanically. Um, but ideally, yeah, we're trying to grab our readers' attention somehow. And I know that for some people, introductions are the hardest part. And in some ways, I agree with that. But there's also something fun about it as well, because it really requires you to sort of clear your mind, to brainstorm, if you will. Because once you find that move, almost like an opening chess move. Once you find that opening move that allows you to sort of open up the paper, then it sort of becomes this awesome moment where like everything opens up before you. It's almost like the Red Sea parting or something. And then the rest of the introduction and even the rest of the essay itself becomes much easier. Um, so yeah, if you can find a technique that leads you into your content, which for the introduction probably has something to do with your role model and the issue of perseverance, um, great. And you'll end with a thesis statement, which you've always remembered, which you probably remember is just a sentence or two that defines your paper. Um, it specifically indicates where your paper is heading. Your thesis statements are probably going to say something specific about your role model and the issue of perseverance. Um, Again, your McGraw-Hill readings, I think, go into detail about thesis statements if you need to revisit this stuff, but it should be pretty familiar to you. Uh, okay, some interesting stuff going on in the chat. I'll let that go. Yeah, Ms. Fox says some people save the introduction, they write that for last. That's a good strategy. I know lots of people who do that. I think it's an awesome strategy, especially if you have trouble getting started. Why get hung up on the introduction then? If you're confident about the meat of your essay, you know, the spilling the beans about what problems your role model encountered and how he or she solved them, then dive right into that. Why get hung up on something that's going to slow you down? You can always come back to the introduction. Plus, once you've written everything, sometimes you have the perspective then to go back and be able to see what you need to do in the introduction. Okay, and then the body, right? This is the part where you're going to develop your ideas. And etc. I'm not gonna read all these out loud, okay? But this is basically the gist of your paper. This is where all the good stuff comes. This is where those 3 bullet points that we just saw, right? I actually have a screenshot of them. Okay, those basic instructions that we're all trying to hit in our essays. Okay, this is going to occur in the body of our paper. And then, yeah, of course, our conclusion. Okay, where we kind of echo, not repeat. Okay, the conclusion is not a place to repeat verbatim what we said in the introduction, but it is a place to echo or remind our readers of what we've covered, what our major claim or main idea was, and yeah, to set our readers down gently, to end on a right final note. to leave a kind of final impression on the page. Okay, so yeah, those are the three main parts. If you're confused at all about what's supposed to be in these sections, you should be taking a screenshot of this, because there's important stuff here. Like, remember, one idea per paragraph. That's pretty important, because we're going to get into organization in just a second. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I got distracted there for a second. When we think about organization, it's also important to think about, like, okay, the basic focus of the essay is basically asking you to consider three things. Those three bullet points I just had up. One, you're going to cover the problems and solutions that your role model encountered. You're going to discuss what you learned from your role model, okay, and you're going to discuss how you can apply that, right? Okay, those three main things. So if we think about that in terms of thirds, 1/3 spent to discussing problems and solutions, 1/3 spent to what you learned, 1/3 spent to how you can apply it. We can just take that 1/3 structure, that balance of dividing things into three equal parts, and apply that to our actual creation of paragraphs. So when we think about how we can organize our information, we might keep that in mind. For example, when we get to the body of our paper, so let's say we've written our introduction, or we're saving it for later, the body of our paper could do something like this. You might take your first requirement, which is just to discuss how your role model persevered, okay, specifically through the problems he or she has encountered and how he or she solved them. Okay, if you're focusing on three separate problems that your role model encountered, you could, in a single paragraph, just cover all three of them in a single paragraph, and then move on to your next paragraph. Okay, and discuss what you learned from your role model's perseverance. And for each of those three situations, you'll discuss them in a single paragraph. And then the third part of that equation, how you can specifically apply what you learned to your own goals, that too could be handled in a single paragraph, right? Or you could choose an organizational strategy like this next one. Then in each of your three main body paragraphs, you might have more than three, but we're assuming that you'll have three because it works well with the thirds, the balance we've just been talking about, 1/3 devoted to each of those three bullet points on the assignment sheet. Paragraph one might devote equal space to each of those three things, right? So for roughly 1/3 of the paragraph, you'll talk about the problem and solution. You'll roughly spend the next third discussing what you've learned from this example. And then you'll roughly spend the final third of that paragraph discussing how you can apply it. And you just repeat it for the next two paragraphs. Now, I can say, and Miss Fox can weigh in if she feels differently for her students, there are other organizational strategies you can use. The important thing, though, is that you have an organizational strategy and that it's sound, and that you're not, for example, jumping from topic to topic within a single paragraph. I've had students, for example, because after they've discussed the specific problem their role model has encountered and how they solved it, because that's already taken them maybe a significant amount of space, sometimes they'll follow that with a separate paragraph where they discuss what they learned and how they can apply it. And then they'll move on to their next paragraph, right, where they'll discuss the problem and the solution, and then follow that with a paragraph where they discuss what they learned and how they can apply it. Or I've had some students who do something similar, where, yeah, three paragraphs. Each paragraph focuses on a different problem, and then what the role model did to solve it. And then maybe near the end of the essay, in a final couple paragraphs before the conclusion, they'll discuss what they specifically learned and how they can apply it. So you have different organizational strategies. The important thing here is to have a plan. And in your weekly check-in for this week, there's a specific question where you have to submit an outline or a plan or a blueprint. Basically something very, very specific that tells you what's going to be in your essay and in what order it's going to appear. And that's just so we instructors can give you feedback on that. to make sure that you do have a sound organizational strategy in place. So yeah, if you're feeling a little bit lost or confused, you can follow one of these strategies we've outlined here, or you can come up with one of your own. Natasha says, can you start your essay with an introduction to how you came to love what you love, and then go into why exactly you chose your role model? Yeah, sure. I mean, I would have to see it in principle. Natasha, I don't think you're in my class, right? And if you are, I'm going to feel really, really uh, embarrassed. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you might want to speak to your instructor. I mean, in principle, it doesn't sound like it's incorrect, but I would have to see it like for real. I mean, what Ms. Fox says is true. You never want to be explicitly like telling the reader this is why I chose my topic. Or sometimes I see uh, students say things like they'll literally tell me like they went to the database and they found this piece of information. Yeah, that sort of stuff should be hidden. So, but Natasha, I didn't get the sense that you were saying that you wanted to literally explain why you chose your topic. Um, Hold on, I have to respond. Uh, Ms. Fox, are you saying did you want to take over the mic for a second?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in real
You can
quick.
answer me through
If
a private message if you want.
if you are explaining to your readers
I'm sorry,
why
folks. I'm
your
getting.
role model,
I'm responding to private messages as I'm delivering the lecture. Okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward. Let's talk about research. Using research as support. You've already started research, right? This is what week one was largely devoted to: finding 3 solid articles. They didn't have to be articles. It could have been a useful video or a podcast, something non-textual as support. But we've already started researching. The importance of research should seem pretty obvious. Every so often, it doesn't happen too often, but I'll get that paper that feels like it's written without research. There might be actual sources listed on the references page, but they don't seem to be informing the paper very much. um, Almost as if the student, let's say they chose, I don't know, Jay-Z as their role model. It almost feels as if the student is thinking, hey, I got this. I know so much about Jay-Z already. I can do this. I can write this. And the paper unintentionally comes across as sort of like, I don't know, let's call this student Paul Johnson. It comes across like the world according to Paul Johnson because everything is from the student's perspective. There's no research coming in. There's no outside evidence or support helping the writer. There's no outside evidence or support that's helping add balance to the paper, and that's a really kind of useful thing to add. So let's talk a little bit about research and specifically how we can incorporate research naturally into our own writing, because that's another concern for students. So once you've found a useful article, and once you've found parts of the article that you think will be useful, you have to find a way to naturally incorporate it within your own writing. Uh, by the way, in 2016, you have all these awesome tools like Digo. I'm going to go ahead and type that in the chat. Some of you might know Digo already. It's an online bookmarking and highlighting tool. Because in the old days, when I would write a paper, I would either have to underline in the book using a pen or a highlighter, or in the case of quotations, I would sometimes grab a notebook and actually write out whatever useful passage I came across because I knew that I might use it later in the paper. But now you can do that really easily. You can use a fancy tool like Digo to bookmark and highlight, or you can just, while you're reading, copy and paste something that's interesting and put it in a separate document, so that you have these useful passages at the ready if you think you might use them in your paper. Um, but yeah, once you have this list or once you have a quotation of mine that you'd like to use, you then will have to incorporate it into your paper. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to use the metaphor of a sandwich. Okay, so we're going to go through each step of the sandwich process here. So we think of the top slice of bread. This is sort of like your main point. It's the idea written in your own words. Okay, it's whatever points you were making before the need for the quotation appears. So if we look at this sentence here about BLTs, we have to imagine that this is a student's own language, right? This is what he was saying. A BLT is extremely hard to resist because humans are chemically drawn to bacon. At this point, the student is probably thinking, wow, guess what? I have this amazing quotation that's going to provide support for what I just said. Okay. So to avoid that sense of this paper is coming all from me, I actually have something from outside that's going to lend authority. So let me go ahead and use that. So the next step in our sandwich, if we think of it as like, for example, a tomato, is what we might think of as the introduction. Okay. Here, introduction is quite minimal. It's just literally referring to usually a simple phrase, usually just, a few words, okay, that is literally setting up the quotation. First of all, we don't want quotations to just appear out of nowhere in your paper. There's nothing more awkward than the readers going along quite comfortably. You're reading, and then boom, a quotation appears. Okay, we have to kind of set up the quotation. So if we look at our example here, here's the student's sentence. Before we can just drop in the quote, we have to kind of lead into it. And a good way to do that is to often identify the the writer's name, right? So in this case, according to Ellen Roberts. Okay, so now we have words that are leading into the quotation. Second, it's sometimes useful to add the author's credentials or authority. Okay, so in this case, we're actually helping the reader come to understand that Ellen Roberts isn't just anyone, but she's a pretty important person because she is head of public engagement at the Center for Life in Newcastle. Okay. But really, all this, yes, it has an important function. We're identifying the speaker, we're identifying who she is, but it's also something we need. Because if we didn't have these words and we just dropped in the quotation would sound smashed into the paragraph, and that's not what we want. Next comes the meat, okay, the good stuff. Or if you're a vegetarian, I don't know what's the star part of a sandwich. The cheese, the hummus, the falafel, whatever the main part of the sandwich is. Put that in there. Seaweed bacon, sure. But yeah, the quote itself, that's the meat. That's the good stuff. Then we can put our quotation in there. And here, by the way, this quotation is awesome. The smell of sizzling bacon in a pan is enough to tempt even the staunchest of vegetarians. There's something deeper going on inside. It's not just the idea of a tasty snack. There is some complex chemistry going on. Okay, so there's our quotation. And important, it seems kind of silly, but don't forget the quotation marks, right? Because if you don't include these quotation marks, and I see this sometimes, technically you're plagiarizing. And students think, well, but I'm not trying to pass it off as my own language. I said it comes from Ellen Roberts, head of public engagement, and in a second, I can't speak. I'm even going to put in a citation. So I'm not plagiarizing. And it's like, yes, you are, because if you don't have the quotation marks, what does that mean? It means that, okay, yeah, this information comes from Ellen Roberts, and you have a citation, but you're suggesting that these are your words. Okay, you're suggesting that you're paraphrasing. You're suggesting that you're just citing the information but not quoting from it. But you are quoting. So don't forget those quotation marks. Okay, that's crucial. Because yeah, it's technically plagiarism. Even if that's not your intention, it still is. And finally, the bottom slice of the toast, because this is not an open face sandwich. Okay, we need to finish the sandwich off. We need to follow up the quotation with commentary. In general, yeah, your paragraph should not be ending with the end of a quotation. I mean, maybe there's an exception to that rule, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of many instances where a paragraph ends with a quote with no follow-up commentary whatsoever. It's awkward, right? So we're going to follow up with commentary, with us explaining the quotation or explaining its relevance. So here, it's it's kind of like putting the final touches of the ribbon on the present, right? Bacon's appeal is not just in the taste buds. The scent actually permeates the brain with chemical messages that scream, "I'm yummy." Okay, so this is what we're trying to achieve. And by the way, this section here would probably be part maybe of an even larger paragraph. Okay, we're just taking a kind of micro inspection, specifically of the moment where the quotation appears. But this is what we're going for. Okay. And I believe your McGraw-Hill readings, as a matter of fact, I know for a fact one of your McGraw-Hill readings specifically talks about how to incorporate naturally quotations into your writing. So if you need even more information about this, your McGraw-Hill chapter covers it. Finally, because we're not animals feeding at a trough, because we're human beings with with manners, we need to clean things up. Okay, this is the equivalent of actually including the citation. Yes, we've identified the writer of the quote. We've identified where the quote comes from, but we don't have the citation in place yet. So we compare that in our metaphor here to the napkin. Okay. So there's an in-text citation. By the way, and I'm going to just mention this real quickly because I don't want to further confuse students, but how should I put this? The as quoted in thing, don't worry about that so much. It's actually not going to apply to very many of you at all. It's just that this very specific quote we're using in this presentation actually comes from the very, very rare instance where you're reading an article and you find this awesome quotation. Let's say the article is written by a guy named John Smith, and you find this awesome quotation, but it's not John Smith's quote. It's somebody else. Okay, John Smith is quoting someone else. In this case, this guy named Jameson, in his article, he's quoting Ellen Roberts. Okay, and that's why it says as quoted in Jameson. So just keep in mind, most of you won't be using as quoted in. You'll be using just the author's last name, a year of publication, and a page or paragraph number. Real quickly, why do I say page or paragraph number? Some of you will find traditional sources that have page numbers, mostly through EBSCOhost, because you might find a PDF file that is quite literally just a snapshot of the original magazine pages, and they'll have page numbers. But there are lots of sources that don't. Online sources, where it's just an article that you keep scrolling down to read. There are no page numbers, so you just have to count the number of paragraphs to tell us where the quotation comes from. But those are the three main parts, okay? Your author's last name, the year of publication, and a page or paragraph number separated by commas. And real quickly, and I just made this in 2 seconds, and I hope this is helpful and not confusing, but here's what most of you, 95% of you, are going to encounter. Oh, wait. Hold on, I'm flying. I had a slide created, and now it's not appearing. Okay, there it is. We'll get back to that. Oh, I don't want to put my sandwich all back together again. Okay, bear with me. And I'm going to keep making you hungry in the process by showing you food. Okay, if this doesn't work, I'll just move on with the show. Yeah. Lettuce, bacon. By the way, I have still some slices of thick cut bacon in my refrigerator. So maybe I'll have to make that after the session. Come on. Okay. To end the metaphor, there's also what we call the reference, right? Now we've served our work of art on a plate. Now that we're ready, to serve our work of art, this is the equivalent of like your reference, which has all the information the reader needs to investigate the quotation, including the author, where it came from, when it was written, how to find it. This stuff goes at the very end of the paper. So we're talking about two different components, right? Through this example, we showed not just how to incorporate naturally a quotation into your own writing, but we've also shown basically what an in-text citation is, okay? So when you use parentheses and put the author's last name, the year of publication, and a page or paragraph number, that's an in-text citation that's done kind of, it's sort of something quick we do right then and there to identify it in the essay, but we go into deeper information once the essay is finished on the references page, okay? And such a reference would look something like this, okay, where we get full information: author's name, date, the name of that article, where it can be found. Okay. Okay, real quickly, I said that the now my cursor has completely disappeared. Hold on, I'm having the most annoying technical problems. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so I said the as quoted in example we just looked at is something that most of you won't encounter. So what will you encounter? Let's imagine, let's pretend that Ellen Roberts, the woman who delivered that awesome quotation on bacon, let's say there's no confusion, okay? She wrote an article. She has this awesome quote from her article, okay? Here's what you'll typically do. If you name the author in your sentence, you have to write then and there, okay? There's no other way to do it. If you mention the author's name in your sentence, you immediately put the year of publication in parentheses. So if you say something like according to Ellen Roberts or in a recent article written by Ellen Roberts, okay, we immediately put a year in publication. Then we deliver our quotation, and at the very end, we indicate the page or paragraph number. Okay, this is only when we use the author's name in our actual sentence. Note too that the end punctuation goes at the end of the citation because that's the true end of the sentence. If we put a paragraph, a period here, then we just have this parentheses floating in the middle, kind of lost on its own. No, the sentence ends here. Or there's a second option, which allows you to save everything for the end. And this is when you don't name the author in your actual sentence. Okay. Uh, so, for example, BLT is extremely hard to resist because humans are chemically drawn to bacon. And instead of saying according to Alan Roberts, we just say indeed, according to one study, and then we deliver our quotation. And then in a final citation, we can put the author's last name, the year, page, or paragraph number. This is probably the most confusing aspect of APAs, that you always have these two different options for going about it. But the one that we just went through, where you present the author's name, identify who that person is, that's a pretty good structure to follow. But technically, you always have two options. I'm going to move on because if this seems at all overwhelming, I'm going to point you to several places where it's you'll get so much more APA information that you'll be good. It's difficult to cover in 10 or 15 minutes in a session. Okay. Finally, let's just talk a little bit more about citing research in general. Okay, APA. As I said at the beginning of the session, APA is not difficult. Okay, it really isn't, but it does require attention to detail. That's a perception that indicates that it's difficult because it does require a lot of attention to detail. So in that sense, yes, it's challenging, but APA itself isn't. If you have the ability to read through the many APA materials that we've made available to you, these include, and I'm going to show them in just a second, several PDFs that Ms. Fox specifically created that are under the essay activity itself. It also includes your McGraw-Hill readings. Okay. If you spend time with those documents, then it's not difficult at all because it really just comes down to, can you follow the examples that are in those documents? So when it comes time to reference your article, can you follow the model? Or when it comes time to create your in-text citation for your quote that just appeared in your essay, can you follow the example? If you can do that, then you're golden. Seriously, it's that simple. But yes, it requires attention to detail in order to get that correct. The purpose of APA is to give credit to sources in a logical, globally understood way. Yeah, that's key too, because sometimes students will say, well, okay, well, who cares that I forgot to italicize the publication name? Or who cares that I put the date, but it wasn't in the exact format that the book showed? Or I put the full author's name, John Smith, instead of putting last name, comma, first initial. Human beings love order, okay? We love logic. We love, and with good reason. If you put yourself in my position, if I get 10 students handing in 10 different references pages, with 10 different ways of students handling the references, that's kind of chaotic. and it makes the whole process of reading and following information more difficult than it needs to be. So yeah, there are rules in place because, hey, they need to be followed. And if you think of your industries, this is commonplace. Those of you who are in digital design or graphic design, right, you might work for a company that has specific in-house guidelines, right? You must use this font style, or you must never use this font style, or you must always include these colors because these are the colors our company uses and that are associated with us. Or if you're in music production or video game design, right? You have your own processes that you go through that have their own guidelines. Yeah, so this ability to be able to uh, give attention to detail, to follow very, very specific guidelines is something you're going to encounter outside of this class. Because how many of you are going to deal with APA again in the future once you're out of school? Probably none of you. But there's a bigger point here, which is, yeah, your ability to follow industry standards. And the industry standard at Full Sail is APA format. You're going to encounter it again, by the way, because all your classes, not just English, will use APA. And finally, yeah, you can understand. You'll understand how to cite sources, which will help you in the future. Okay, so each citation has two parts. I just alluded to it before. There's the in-text citation, which happens in the actual essay or paper, and then there's the references page. Okay, you must have both parts. The references page itself. Okay, so this is a separate page at the very end of your document. Okay, it's called the references page. It's not called bibliography. It's not called works cited. That's MLA. It's called references. And actually, when you get to the references page, it's not even called references page. It's just called references. Okay, it's a separate page at the end. It's where you include that detailed information about everything. And it enables your readers to find the source and investigate further. Sometimes you might not think that's an important thing, but it is for me. Sometimes I like your sources. Sometimes I go to them and read them just out of interest. Or sometimes I'll be reading something online and the references that appear at the end, I'll click on them because I'm interested. So why not provide them? And finally, whether you've copied words from a source or used ideas from information, you must cite the source on your references page, okay? And here's some examples. Real quickly, references, it's just an idea, it's just a matter of identifying who, right, who wrote it, when, so the publication date, what we're talking about, the actual title of the article, and then where it was found, right, where it was published. And there's an example. This is an end of the paper reference for a film, okay, but it's got the who, in this case, the director. It's got the when, 1980, the what, the film title, and yeah, kind of where, United States, Lucasfilm. And then, of course, in-text citations, which we've just taken a glimpse at. They go in the actual text of your essay. They're short, so they don't interrupt the flow of your writing. They occur in parentheses, okay, immediately after the quotation. And they also mark which ideas, words, etc., came from the outside source. So yeah, in-text citations, a good way to think of them is that they're sort of shorthand. They sort of give you minimal information, but important information, and they point toward the references page. So if I see that you have an in-text citation for Johnson, then when I get to your references page, I can just find the author's name, Johnson, and I get the full information for that source. Right? That's what I just referred to, that it connects with the references page. So here's some more examples. Okay. So an in-text citation can be as simple as author's last name and year. Okay. And also this demonstrates what I kind of pointed to earlier. You always have these two options, right? In one, the speaker, Amy Watkins, is actually mentioned in the sentence. So when we do that, we immediately put the year in parentheses. And then after the quotation, we put the page or paragraph number. If we don't mention her name in the actual sentence, that's fine too. But then we make sure that we include it in the citation at the end. There's further resources you can use, and real quickly, because we're getting near the end of this session, I'm going to quickly show them to you. And I should just point out, because it is kind of one of the questions for the weekly check-in, I think, and I don't think I've covered it yet, but this whole issue of citation, it's not a matter of, hey, these are just rules for this specific class or these are rules for this specific university. There is a bigger picture here of why it's important to give credit to our sources, okay? I'm just going to give several different examples, and you can pick the finest three when you take your quiz. But for example, there's just the basic ethical component of you should always be giving credit when credit is due, right? If you've gotten help, because that's essentially what you're doing, is you're getting help from others who've written on these topics, and you're using that help either in the form of direct quotations, or you're paraphrasing and putting ideas in your own words, but those ideas came from someone else. Yeah, it's just good form, okay, to give credit to other people. Second, and this is equally important, it adds authority, credibility, trustworthiness to your paper. This should seem like common sense, even though you maybe don't think about it consciously. When you read things and see that the author is referring to things outside, or is quoting directly from outside, it just makes you think more impressively of the author and the work. Um, right? I think earlier I mentioned the example of the paper that's completely written from the student's point of view, with hardly any attention given to outside sources at all. And then, yeah, it just takes away from the authority or credibility of the author. Um, yes, we want to hear your voice. We want to hear your vision in your piece, and you have plenty of space to do that. Uh, but relying on others for evidence and support is actually just good technique. Um, it just creates the fancy term for this is ethos. That sense of credibility or trust we have in the writer. You establish that um, when you turn to outside sources for help. Um, Finally, or actually two more real quickly, it allows readers to find your information. Okay, that's important. And lastly, just yeah, you're avoiding plagiarism. Okay. Um, Obviously, just taking someone's words and passing them off on your own is plagiarism, but so is incorrect citation. Okay, so forgetting to put those quotation marks around direct language, even if it contains a parenthetical, it's still plagiarism. Okay, so yeah, be careful of that. These, what you're seeing here, can I get to it real quickly? If I go to the actual essay assignments, okay, so here we go, composing with care, assignment number 2. You have lots of documents available. Okay, all these guys. I mean, one is the actual instructions, one's the rubric, but you have 2 other documents. And one of them is this guy here called APA Basics. And I'm telling you, if you spend your time going through this document, I'm not sure how many pages it is. There are quite a number of them. But if you take, let's say, the 30 minutes, the 45 minutes to go through this document with care, you will finish the document with a pretty solid understanding of APA. Like, you'll already be able to get APA probably 90% correct or higher if you take those 30 minutes, 45 minutes to go through this document. Okay? You also have this document here, or excuse me, this document here, which is a visual guide to APA formatting. So here it explains things like APA also refers to layout issues. So yes, it refers to in-text citations and the references page, but it also refers to the overall look of your document. So that means having a cover page. That means choosing an appropriate font size and style. That means having margins set correctly, having a header, indenting paragraphs. Okay, and this visual guide explains what you need to do and how your paper should look. So, for example, it tells you all margins should be set to 1 inch. It tells you what the header should look like and what it should include. Okay, and even gives you some tips here, like all you have to do to create the header is double click the top inch of the page. It tells you which font size and style to use. Use only Times New Roman 12 point for all content from top to bottom. Okay, so from your cover page all the way down to the reference page. One single consistent font size and style. That's sort of the beauty and elegance of APA formatting. It's consistency. Some students think, well, that's dull. Actually, it's the opposite. It looks so professional and so clean. And it shouldn't be important, but it is. But when we instructors open up a document that looks clean and professional, um, it can only do good things for your grade. Let's put it that way. It can make words that might otherwise be questionable look better than perhaps they are. So why not go for that? So anyway, you have this visual guide here that shows you everything you need to do. Okay, so that your paper should look like this in terms of look. But yeah, if you scroll down, you also get examples of what the references page should look like. Within the paper, you have examples of in-text citations. Or if you have a quotation that goes over 40 words, it has to be put in block format. So here you have an example of what block format looks like. Okay. You have the McGraw-Hill readings. And finally, you have a website called projectapa.info. This was made by a fellow Full Sail instructor, and her emphasis was really just to focus on the basics of APA, the stuff that students would most need to know. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in the chat. I can't remember. Ms. Fox, is Project APA info mentioned in any of the assignment descriptions? So, okay, yes, it is. Okay, good. So, yeah, you have it here, but you also have it in the assignment descriptions. Okay, Project API.info. You can see it categorized by in-text citations, references page, format, etc. So make use of all these tools. APA, it's a breeze. Trust me, it really is. It's so easy. And 20 points out of 100 for your essay is devoted largely to APA. So why lose those 20 easy points? Especially when all it takes is the hour or so to really spend time with APA rules and guidelines and figure out how to do it correctly. Okay, so that pretty much, I think, is the end of the session, right? There are no more slides. So this is the question and answer portion of the session. Or Ms. Fox, if you think I've forgotten anything, you can chime in as well. But students, yeah, if you have questions, now is the time to ask them. If you feel comfortable with what we've gone over, I'm not going to force you to stay in the room. So you are allowed to go enjoy the rest of your afternoon. But for those of you who have questions, I will hang out and answer them. So have at it. Take advantage of me.
I did see a question in the chat about the running head on the APA example. That should, on the first
welcome,
page, on the cover page, hold on, I think Professor Sesson's speakers are off. So on the cover page, it should say running head and then a short version of your essay's title. On the rest
can people
of
still
the
hear me?
pages, it should say just the title.
Okay, good. I got a private message from someone saying that there's a problem with speakers in my end. Plus, I wanted to answer because nobody's asked me questions. I hope that is an indication that this session was just so clear, so lucid, so incredible that you have no questions. Natasha says, okay, so do we come up with our own name? I'm not sure what you mean by our own name or what you're asking in general there. You mean your own title for the essay? Yeah, Miss Fox just answered. Yes, you should be coming up with your own title. And hopefully it's more interesting than my English paper or my role model. Though the good news is I don't take off points for having a lousy title. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording because it sounds like not that many people have questions. So I don't want to make the people who are watching this after the fact sit there in boredom. So I'm stopping the recording now.